Welcome to the Intelligence Amplifiers, podcast that celebrates the people who make the intelligence a collective superpower. In every episode, we uncover the stories of learning and development leaders who amplify knowledge, break down silos, and empower teams to thrive. These are the enablers of insight, the ones turning expertise into action and shaping the future of work by ensuring that the right knowledge reaches the right people at the right time. So, if you're ready to explore how the intelligence is amplified and shared across organizations, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of Intelligence Amplifiers. Today, we have Bob Mosher joining us. Hello, Bob.
Hello, friends. It's great to be here. I appreciate the invite. Looking forward to the dialogue.
Me too. Me too. And I know you have decades of experience in learning and development, and I know we're going to talk quite a bit about some of the strategic aspects of what the industry is facing, and I'm super interested in that. Before we jump into what you're seeing on the horizon and going on today, I wanted to kind of learn more about your earlier career. How did you get into learning and development? I believe you were a high school teacher, elementary teacher at one point.
Yeah, it's kind of got pulled in kicking and screaming, frankly, but it was kind of in my pedigree. My mother was a school teacher, my sister as well. My daughter also has an education degree, but yeah, I was an elementary school teacher, certified in the state of New York for what we call K to sixth grade, taught third and fourth for a number of years, and didn't want to get my master's in the typical stuff. I had a kind of an unsettled feeling about where I was and how effective I was at education, frankly. And this pamphlet appeared in our faculty room table one day on a computer degree, master's degree for educators. And I was like, this is 87. And I was like, that's cool. I mean, I had done some programming in undergraduate, very, very minor, but liked it and thought, wow, the marriage of education and this new computer thing might be cool. And so I was one of the first graduating class of that program. And Marco, it changed my trajectory. I left public education to feed my family a bit better and got a job with a tiny, small startup computer training company that went on to be part of what is now Skillsoft, if you know the technology. Found my way from there into Microsoft as a senior director of learning and strategy evangelism in the learning team, the global learning team with a global responsibility. And then found my way into what I do now because I was and we'll talk about this, right? And this kind of goes into, I think, where we are and where we're going, because I was really, through that entire journey, I was challenged by the fact that I just didn't feel things stuck. I felt people learned stuff, and I thought I was a pretty decent educator. And I had a remarkable team at Microsoft. I mean, unbelievable team at Microsoft. But in the end, could our network engineers leave that and run a network? And I was really challenged by it. And this is 20-something years into my career. This is my 43rd year. And I met this remarkable guy, Dr. Con Gufferson, who was doing 5 Moments of Need learning theory at the time, brought him into my team as a consultant, and it changed the trajectory of my career for the next 20 years. And here I sit in what I do now and in my company, and talk a bit more. It's interesting. It's kind of, each thing was kind of happenstance, right? One thing, I didn't leave something because I was pulled to something else. I kind of left things because I didn't feel like it was a fit, and until I arrived here, honestly. So it's exciting.
I almost see it. I almost see it not as living, but transcending, right? Like it sounds like
I like that.
You started in a family of educators, so obviously care about education and care about helping people, I guess, get to that next level, and you can double click on that. And you saw this opening of computer technology was kind of transforming how we learn, and e-learning or computer-based learning was the thing that kind of emerged in the 80s. And I find it really interesting that you joined one of the largest
technology firms as a strategist
Yeah.
on learning. And yeah, that's and we had one of our Technicon board members, Chris Schaefer. He's been with Microsoft for 30 plus years. He ran the
Mm.
engineering side of learning, and I was always kept being blown away by the scale. Like normally we would have learning and development managers responsible for 2, 3, 5,000 employees, and he would be like 100,000 employees, right? Like
Well,
that's a small city.
we, internal to Microsoft, we were 60,000 plus at the time. But think about this, Marco. The irony of my role was I wasn't just, boxed in by that. We were externally facing. We trained over 9 million techs worldwide a year. Think about that. I really, that's a big net. And obviously, as you say, a remarkable brand. And I had a great role, terrific boss, the power, breadth, money of Microsoft behind me. And I thought I'd arrived. Like that was going to be it. And sure enough, 3 years into that journey, the itch kept itching. And, I want to be awful careful, friend, because I've talked about this journey before, and I am not anywhere along the lines blaming any one of those organizations. They were all remarkable, and Microsoft's a software company and really good at it. And so I just was so um, uh, uh, plagued, that's a strong word, by the fact that was training enough, was e-learning enough, was, and in the end, I got in this. I love what you said earlier. I got in this as an educator from the listening to educators around the dinner table, as long as I can remember, because I wanted to help people change their lives, perform better, and training, I believed, helped remarkably in that, but I didn't feel it was enough. And a lot of our techs complained that although they were certified, they still couldn't run a network. And I don't blame the certification because we did what we could. But this world of what happens after training, I really was enamored with, and that's where I was pulled away from that remarkable. My wife, oh, she'll forgive me to this day for leaving that terrific job, but I just couldn't. There was an unsettledness in me. In L&D, were we doing enough? And that's where I gotten to today.
Got it. And I can see training as an sort of like as an event, right? Like you're not certified and now you're certified, right?
Yeah,
And then there's growth, which is more as a mindset, right? So it kind of
I love
transcends
that.
just being an
Love that.
event. I'm curious, 9 million people you were helping with, acquiring knowledge they did not have before.
Mhm.
And again, going back to Microsoft as and this huge scale, and one thing that I observed in Microsoft is data, right? Like
Mhm.
they had a ton of data, and they were measuring. They measure now. I don't know if they were measuring back then. So I'm curious how much of
I love
that
that.
sort of like unsettledness and the insight that people were quote unquote certified, they were checking the box but not able to perform. How much of that was informed empirically by observing, or how much was it informed by actually looking at the hard data and having the
Yeah, no,
data at that scale?
but well, very insightful question. And you're right. I think it was, the Kirkpatrick, I'm sure you guys know about him or heard
Yeah.
about that whole
Mhm.
thing, right? That was,
Yeah.
very trendy at the time. Of course, Jack Phillips and Patty with their wonderful work have come along with Level 5. In the end, we were there to serve the business, right? We were Microsoft, obviously they're there. They want techs to be good techs. And that's at the same time, it's a business, right? And so we're driven by renewals. We're driven by people being able to use our software and implement it effectively. And so that's what we in the learning team were there to do. And, friend, I love your question because, and I think a lot of L&D professionals struggle with this, but it was hard for us to have data in our world to correlate to that, and we had consumption and certificates and how many passed and if they liked it. And, but we didn't have some of the same data that the rest of the company had, which was, usage of the software renewals and stuff. So I think this is the question that L&D gets asked a lot, which is, okay, you know, we got the completion data, we got the satisfaction data, we got the, they think they can do it data, but how about the do it data? How about the KPIs? How about the ROI? And I think even to this day, a lot of L&D people go, well, it's hard. I think I think part of that, which I would love to talk more about today, friend, is that, well, if you stop at training, it's hard to move into the work because training data is not work data. It definitely is a part of impacting it. I've never refuted that, but that's not what a business wants to know. They want hard data correlation to performance, and it was a bit of a struggle.
Yeah. That measuring impact, right? That Kirkpatrick level 3 and 4, that's the holy grail. And it's also confounded by a whole bunch of other things. So that's what makes it super hard. So I get it. And so you had this inkling to depart Microsoft and solve this problem. And so what was next for you? How did you go about that?
This is excellent. Here's the pivot, right? I oversaw an advisory board there of our training centers, and one of them was a wonderful man, Alfred Bremitz, from one of our larger training partners in EMEA and Europe, and he was playing with this tool, which now we would have called an EPSS, Electronic Performance Support System, and he showed it to me at a bar during one of our meetings when I was in the middle of this journey and the stressful, uneasiness for me. And I was like, holy cow, where has this been? I've been in education for 20 something years. By then I have an advanced degree in the States. I have a master's degree, like I shared earlier. I didn't see a PowerPoint, let alone a course or a degree on this whole performance support, just in time, 2 clicks, 10 seconds, while use and learn while working thing. And e-learning isn't that. At least for me, it's not been, right? You take it at work. I get that. You don't leave a classroom and all that kind of stuff. You sit at your desk, but that's not what I was looking at. I was looking at something that while you worked, while you did your job, you learned, and that was, Marco, that was it for me. And that's when I met Dr. Ken Gofferson, who's now my business partner. And he had the 5 moments of need. And I, at the same time, learned a lot about his work. And I was like, okay, for me, the moons have aligned. Now it all makes sense. My calling, my intent is crystal. And it had not been for 22 years.
Got it. So it just life happened, and you met the right person and had the right insights, and suddenly all these dots connected, and you discovered this purpose. How would you express that? Like, how would you say that your purpose is, or that manifests itself?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because it's basically, I don't know how this goes over with your audience, but this is for me anyway, right? I don't consider myself an L&D professional anymore or an instructional designer. Not because I don't frankly disagree with the brand. The legacy was my journey before this, right? I consider myself a performance architect, for instance, now, or a performance consultant, little overused term, and means a lot to different people, but and so it really is designing from performance back, right? I want to minimize the training footprint, knowing that there probably still should be some, but I want to optimize the workflow learning environment so that performers can master, become competent, and ultimately experts in whatever they do. And so my bullseye is now the workflow and enabling as much work, as much learning and support in that context as I can, and still do training where necessary. It's really a 180 pivot, frankly, from how I used to see it. The tip of the sword was training for me for 22 years. And then if I had time, I made job aids maybe, or, you know, this is a reverse engineering of that and design for performance first.
So it's fine tuning and optimizing performance in the flow of work as opposed to this
Perfect.
micro learning sort of
Perfect.
um, events, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious. I'm curious. So you mentioned mastery, and I get
Mm,
how this continuous feedback loop. Like I'm doing my job, and I'm continuously getting like, hey, you could have done this better. Or here's a coaching moment, and that leads to mastery. And so over time, whatever path you're on, you get really good at that. You master that path.
yeah.
Uh, what about transformational learning? Like what I'm going with here is like I was on one path and I want to jump on a different path.
Yeah.
Like for example, in tech we often have like I'm an engineer and I'm
Hmm.
interested in becoming an engineering manager, which is a
Hmm.
totally different set of skills and totally different job. Like is that it does can that also happen in the flow of work, or do you need to have more of a transformative sort of like we're gonna pull you out and
Yeah.
give you a new bag of
It's,
tricks?
I
Yeah.
love, I'm very super insightful questions, Marco. Yeah. That's, I think that's one of the most misunderstood kind of learning. Um, because I think it's the majority of it for adults. What you're saying is I have some working knowledge of something I'm doing, some experience, and I'm going to go to a different role. And in some cases, maybe I'm still going to be a leader, but I'm going to be a leader over here, or I'm going to move up in technology from an engineer to, some other area. But the reality is I probably still have a fairly strong understanding of technology, right? I don't have to go back to what is this and what is that, right? And so it absolutely can. If I can throw out some terms, and this is again on my side, just so I can put this in a way that I can attack is for me there was mastery, which is in Kahn's lexicon moments 1 and 2, which is new and more in his moments of need framework. Right. I'm going to come back to more in just a minute. But mastery is getting to a point of understanding and maybe even doing. Right. Then C is the application of mastery. And I know a lot of people put mastery there, and that's fine because I think it's all about semantics. But for me, in training, we got people to a certain point of mastery, and I could test them, and I got a score back. Right? Competency is taking that and going back and saying, okay, look, well, I mastered it but now I have to apply it in my world, contextualize it. Right? That to me is competence, not just mastery. And then I love what you said earlier, then if I want to become even better at that, I enter what's the world of expertise. And expertise is another level where I have automaticity and I can do things without thinking. And, that kind of, I can generalize to other things and even learn newer things or different things without a whole lot of effort because I have that level of expertise, right? That's the 3-stage journey for me. What you're describing in the transformation side, I think is between that competency and expertise side. Right. And what I've learned is that that's not really always a training moment, formal training moment. Right. It's because people have understanding and depending on what they're coming from, they may have a lot of understanding. We made a mistake back in my earlier days in Microsoft when we went from the menus. You're too young to remember this, I'm sure, young man, but we went from the menus to the ribbon. What's now called the ribbon. It's the buttons across the top. And our thought was, okay, we got to train people again, but they don't know the ribbon. Well, wait a minute. They know bolding, formatting, indents, margins. They've been using Word forever, but it's just buttons now. It's a ribbon. But we didn't not understand, but we didn't optimize that instruction because that's a transformative moment, not for a user of that software. It's not a mastery moment, right? As like it would have been when they first understood Word. It's a simple example, but right. So I think that's the opportunity for us, my friend, in most of what comes across our desk, is it's really transformative learning. because they're adults and they very often have some degree, if not a lot, of understanding, but we keep falling back in this train up model, train up, kind of a thing.
And so fast forwarding to today, because we've been kind of like on how you got to this point, and now you're at Apply Synergies, your company, and you have this model of 5 moments of need.
Mm-hmm.
What does that entail? Like how does that
Sure.
how's
Sure.
that an antidote to all the challenges that you've collected over the decades?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What a great way to get here. Yeah. And that's what it was, friend. And to kind of go back to the first hiccup of this, Khan basically said, here's what you're struggling with is you don't meet all 5 moments of need. You only meet 2. And there's 3 more out there. You don't know what they are quite yet, maybe, but you have a sense as an educator that you're falling short on those. And so the 5 moments are new and more, right? I don't know anything at all, and that's new, right? Frankly, a very rare moment for adults. New meaning I have no clue, right? A lot of adults have a clue, but more is okay. Look, I have an understanding. I'm a sales rep already. I'm going to become a sales manager. I'm going to move, or I'm going to move to sell a different product. But I already know I had no sales, right? So that's a more moment, right? And by the way, those two are brilliantly met. Those needs are brilliantly met with instruction. That's where I hands down defend training. The reality, though, is that if I'm going to go on to the world of performance, again, in Khan's lexicon, I have to now apply, keep up with change, and solve problems when I get into them, right? Apply, solve, and change. And what Khan learned through his 50 years of work is that the deliverable and the construct and the framework for those last 3 moments are not a training moment, right? Because of the nature of those needs. And so in our world, we, at Apply, we design for apply first. We try to figure out what the workflow is, what people do for a living, what their job is. And to my point earlier, we tried to design what we call a digital coach. AI is going to fall here for sure. These kinds of things. Digital coach is more of a construct than like a tool per se, right? But I'm going to build a digital coach that sits in the workflow and helps me learn at the moment of apply. That's the bullseye, right? Now, if I have to learn something I don't know, fine, we'll teach you. We'll do instruction. But the majority of the world that you have to become competent and an expert in is apply, solve, and change. And so designing for those moments is where we sit. And that was the itch I couldn't scratch, Marco. Right? That was what I was like, even when I taught 8-year-olds. I'm like, so I helped them become, 4th graders, but did they what does that mean for them in their life? And when I moved into corporate training, I was an IT trainer, spreadsheets, all those kinds of things. And I don't know when they walked out the door if they could do anything I taught them in their world. I knew they knew it, and I could watch them practice, and I could even test them. But I did not know if that meant they could apply, solve, and change with what they'd been taught.
Got it. So I like that, and new, that's like, I don't even know I don't know, right? More is like, I know that I don't know. And, to your point, that's solvable. Like there's training content or solution out there.
Sure.
But, and yeah, that's a problem we understood and have solved those two for a while. But then applying what I learned and solving actual problems, and then you kind of chasing that mastery through change, right? Like those are the things that are much harder for us and this is where it goes beyond L&D, right? Because they left the building. Like we just have no feedback
Totally
loop,
agree.
right?
Totally agree. Yep. Yeah. And so this is where I love where your metaphor. Then what I would argue, we have to leave the building in our design, right? We got to get out of the wing of the building. I was building 18. I can literally say that when I was at Microsoft, and that was the training building. It wasn't the office building or the .NET building or the networking. No. It was the training building. And so if I'm going to understand leadership, we're doing a big leadership project right now with a large government agency. If I'm going to understand leadership in that organization, sure, there's listening skills and conflict resolution, and I get those. But how do you lead in that company? What does a leader do? Literally, what does a leader do? 9 to 5, first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. And when you dig in that way, it's called workflow analysis, is what we call it. You'd be surprised how defined it is. But it pivots on the work being done, not the knowledge to do it quite yet. If we don't have a view of the work flow, you can't leave the building because you're not out there. But if I sit down with 20 leaders or 10 or 5 in a room and say, look, give me all the tasks to lead here. What do? I can, at the end of a couple of days, emerge with a pretty clear picture of what leadership looks like at that company. And therefore, I can design a very different 5-moment solution for that than if it was, well, we want all our leaders to be empathetic. We want all of our leaders. I get that. Every leader should be. But in what context? And that's apply, solve, and change. And by the way, back to our ROI question, it's a lot more measurable.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it sounds a lot like that Kirkpatrick 3 and 4, right? The impact to the business, impact to self, and impact to business ultimately. And so, in a nutshell, like how without going too much into detail, like how do you go about that bullseye apply, solve, change?
Yeah. I love that. Three real quick things. All right, 3 analyses, if I may, and if you want to read more on it, obviously we can talk about where you can look for that. But Kahn had to have a methodology for this, so it is something known as enable, ENABLE, like ADDIE. You may have known that one, ADDIE, that acronym. We love acronyms. And so 3 things allow you to do it. Number 1 is called workflow analysis. So often we pivot on the deliverable right away. I have to make a training course. So let's get in a room and talk about the training course. I don't even know that yet. I have no idea about the deliverable till I know the work. So the first thing is rapid workflow analysis, where I understand the processes, tasks, and supporting knowledge to do the work, the workflow. I'm not talking about impacting it yet or teaching it yet. I have to have a clear understanding of the workflow. Once I know that, I have to pivot to the solution, right? So we do something called critical skills analysis. Again, to give it some jargon, what critical skills does, it says, look, now that we know the workflow, the tasks, the processes, the supporting knowledge, and we're going to try to support that in the work as much as we can by building a digital coach. Things still have to get trained. And we throw the words blended learning around in our industry a lot, right? But what we mean by blended learning is how much training versus how much not training, and how much is learned while doing, right? And so for Kahn, in his methodology, the pivot is failure. If a task involves a critical level of failure, and he's got a 7-point rubric there where someone gets hurt or sued or loses their job or, catastrophic bad things, you absolutely have to teach that, because you can't say, well, go out in the work and have at it. Here's a digital coach. Good luck. And if you fail, you'll learn. Well, if failure involves death, it's a bad thing, right? So that helps us with the design of what is taught, targeted training, we call it. What do you target to train? Not everything. And what do you allow to be learned in the workflow because it is safe to be done there. And then you build a digital coach for that. Again, that's a construct, not so much a technology. And then you build targeted training for what needs to be taught.
Got it. So it's really it's walking in the shoes of the almost like a master, and then like reverse engineering and figuring out like
it is.
Yeah, what are the skills and
what's the most two of the most powerful ways we ever learned in history. First, of course, is trial and error, right? Yeah. Nothing beats screwing up and getting out of it, right? But again, back to my critical skills thing, sometimes it's bad. I mean, that's a terrifying way to learn everything. So we put people with mentors early on, right? The whole, but what that mentor did was, if they were good, is they let me do things to a point where I was gonna, and they like, wait. Okay, I'm gonna step in here, or watch me do this first, then try it, because that crossing that line caused something bad to happen. But a good mentor let me wander with understanding, and kind of guided me. But in the end, experiential learning trumps anything. But it can't be done, just chaotically. There has to be a defendable design to it. And that's where the methodology comes in.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I keep thinking, ancient Greece, and before we had academia and Socrates, we had apprenticeships, right? And that's how
Love
you
it.
learn blacksmithing, or whatever whatever
Yeah.
guild you were joining.
Well,
And those
that's why we
young,
call it a digital coach, my friend, right? Because that's what that person was. The problem is, in corporate America, we can't have a coach for every I don't think. It makes no sense. It just doesn't make any economic sense, let alone that it's scalable or anything else, right? So to your point, it's a return to that model, but in a way that you can scale, in a way that's economic, in a way that, there's a lot of things that mentors aren't great at, to be honest. They are hard to keep current. They may not be good at something they think they're great at. They may have learned it the wrong way. And, so we want to remediate that a bit. And this kind of an approach helps.
yeah. And so, speaking of this topic, so we kind of know what works, right? Like coaching, mentorship, permission to screw up, right? Those things historically work, but you nailed it with and they're not scalable, right? Like they're not practical. So I'm curious, how do we use technology, and what are you excited about on the horizon with respect to solving for, we know this works, and maybe now we can use
Yeah.
technology to scale it and enable it?
Well, obviously, friend, the elephant in the room is AI, right? I mean, there's the generative side of it. If you're not listening to this and you're excited about that, I don't think you get it. If you feel threatened by it or scared of it, or that means you're not also playing with it, which is one of our responsibilities, by the way. Doctors don't use leeches anymore because they found better ways to do whatever that thing used to do. Right. And so what makes me anxious about our industry, if I may go there, Marco, is I've been in this long enough, especially the last 20 years, as I've tried to help people understand this workflow learning thing, is we are highly risk averse, and very merry to our ways and our Andy and again, I get it. It's got years of research, and some of us have degrees in it. I get all of that. I do. But my responsibility, like that doctor, is to remain current, and AI is it. And boy, what it can do to accelerate content generation, SME harvesting of knowledge, deep research into documentation, standardization of structure. I mean, I can go on and on here. And if you're an L&D person listening, you go, yep, that's hard. Yep, that's hard. Yep, can't do that fast enough. I mean, and how could you not go, oh my gosh, here's something that can help make that better, right? So we're playing around with prompting in our company around our methodology. We hear every day, we can't get the SMEs long enough. Billy just canceled his interview. Blah, 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 blah. And so I'm not going to be able to deliver my deliverable for 3 months. Well, guess what? You're going to be able to do it in 4 weeks soon, because of all this remarkable stuff. So, but if we don't get in the deep end, it's,
And I think,
go.
yeah, and I think you're nailing something there. One of the key things that I heard is we're almost laggards in this, right? Like us as
No
an
doubt.
L&D, like we're and we're scared, quote unquote, to play with this. And it goes back to our earlier conversation of L&D as order takers downstream from the business, to like changing this upside down, where L&D is strategic, has the main seat at the table, and is helping lead. How do you reconcile that?
Marco, Oh my gosh, you had to pick that giant, didn't you? I've heard we need a seat at the table from the podium for 25 years. And here's my problem with it. That implies we haven't fixed it yet, if I'm still hearing it. I don't know another profession that would allow that or be allowed to do it. Right. I mean, so here's one of my challenges to that is if we still don't have a seat at the table, whose fault is that? I mean, honestly, let's I think there's been plenty of opportunity over the years to sit there. The danger, and you nailed it perfectly, is it's risky. It's courageous. It involves change. It involves self-awareness and maturity to be wrong or not know enough or maybe have to do something very different than I have been, that all of those things. And the irony is that's the business we're in, by the way, which is teaching people to be able to handle those moments. And we struggle with them as a profession. Right. And so here we go again. I've written about this a number of times lately. I thought 20 years ago when I saw that APSS, Marco, that when I showed this to those I knew, they were going to go, oh my gosh, let's go. Here I sit 20 years later, having yelled it, written on it, podcast it, keynoted it, whatever. And still, I would argue the majority of your listeners may not even have an idea what I'm talking about. But again, when I first brought this out, e-learning was really bustling. LMSs were huge. Corporate universities, like buildings, were being built. And now that I look back, I guess I don't blame someone who ran that going, wait. I'm gonna screw that up. I'm gonna, do something plenty busy right now. The irony is, I don't think we're sitting there anymore, Marco. I think we are sitting at a really, I want to use the right word, really susceptible time as an industry. And so often pivots come out of anxiousness. I'll risk if I'm scared. I'll risk if I'm, backed into a corner. And I really think it's time. I really do think it's time because this train has left the station. And, my dad used to say, hop on or get run over. Right. So I'd rather be on the train.
Yeah, you said you don't like the term L&D. It's got
Hmm.
this connotation, and you also mentioned change really happens, or at least the mindset change, which is what we are dealing with here,
Hmm.
happens when you're kind of like cornered, like you don't really have, like it's not safe anymore, like you don't have a lot of
Yeah.
options. And one of the things that I've observed, we had sort of like a downturn, at least in the tech world in the last couple of years. And a lot of L&D is one of the first things that kind of gets sacked, right? Like it's not strategic.
Yep.
It's a feel
Yep.
good kind of thing. That's kind of, that there's a perception. But what I've seen, and you kind of touched on this as well, what I've seen is when L&D becomes about enablement, uh, it strategically changes. Like suddenly
Perfect.
VPs are supporting it and so forth.
Perfect.
And you mentioned that word enablement as well. And so, yeah.
Marco, COVID, right? I know L&D professionals who were exposed because of it and ones that were accelerated because of it. And the ones that were, again, this is my view, but quite frankly, I cast a pretty decent net. Those that were seen as strategic were seen as part of the business. And I know one L&D leader who the CEO of the company, whom he'd seen speak multiple times, maybe bumped into socially twice, called him and said, "We have a problem. This insurance. Think about insurance, COVID." And he's like, "You're the guy to help me solve this." That's because was seen in the performance business. He made this pivot. Those that were like the wing of the building, catalogs of courses, again, I have to be careful here because I don't want to come across like I'm saying those are in and of themselves bad. But when the push came to shove, I love the way you said it earlier, those were on the wrong side of the ledger paper. And I've been there myself in 40 years. I don't want to be an expense. I want to be an investment. Too much of L&D is still on the wrong side of that equation, my friend. It's going to be interesting to see how it falls out when we hit yet another huge pivot in work, how people work, the technologies that enable work. Big deal.
Yeah. So zooming out a bit, you had this 40-year career. You started as an elementary school teacher. You went on to lead the learning strategy for one of the biggest technology companies on the planet, responsible for 9 million engineers worldwide, or some huge number like
Certified
that.
a year, yeah. 9.5 million a year we were certifying at the time, yeah.
Yeah. And then you saw the challenges with existing model and a better way to do that, and build this new framework that's focusing back on the business. So it's a wonderful career. Looking back where you started, what would be a piece of advice you would give to your younger self?
Yeah, have some guts. You know, we're called learning. I was called an learning and development professional. I would argue I did not live up to the moniker. I was an L&D, but to me, a professional is somebody who excels at the trade, challenges the trade, leads the trade. People come to ask about stuff, not tell them what to do about stuff, i.e. order taker, right? And I was scared. I was complacent. Now complacent's the right word. I was just, when I got into it, I fell into this serve others. And so therefore I'll stand with my clipboard waiting till someone tells me they want a 5-day course. So wrong. A doctor wouldn't sit there waiting for you to come and ask for 9 Advil because your arm hurt. I go to them because I view them as a medical professional who's an expert and is going to take me to a healthier place. Well, darn it. It took me 35 years to get that energy up and confidence. And I think we have to look at ourselves. We are a long-standing profession with theory and all this great tons of content. Darn it, let's have the guts to stand behind that, shoot holes in it, and be the professional at the table who owns that conversation and will listen and create performance solutions. And I should have done it way earlier. So I get complain about my career sometimes and what other people put me through. But you know what? It's a lot of it was self-inflicted.
It's a learning experience, and it always is self-inflicted, and that's why we have this podcast. One of the reasons is to share experience from people who've been there, done that, and so we can inform the next generation. And I heard a lot about guts, courage. I heard about leadership, and kind of just paving the way.
Yeah. Thank you for inviting me and hosting these conversations. They are more important now than ever, Marco, in my opinion, in 43 years looking back.
Well, Bob, thank you for sharing all that wealth of knowledge. I learned a lot. I got inspired and really appreciate having you here.
My honor, friend. Appreciate the invite. Hope it's helpful.
That's it for this episode of the Intelligence Amplifiers. If you like what you've heard, be sure to subscribe or follow so you don't miss out on the future episodes. And if you're interested in being a guest or have a question, check out the episode description for how to reach us. Also, don't forget to check out Plus Plus, the platform that makes collective intelligence at scale possible. Find out more at plusplus.co. Thank you for listening, and until next time, keep amplifying.